Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It is me, your favorite Ohioan. We are back with another election prediction. After the midterms, we took a little bit of a break, but that's okay. We're coming back. And before we get into the video, I do want to say that, as proven in 2022 in the midterms, I am the greatest election predictor ever. Completely correct in every single state. We didn't get anything wrong. We are simply the best. So take this with a grain of salt. I'm being sarcastic. So we're going to do Trump versus Biden, probably DeSantis versus Biden tomorrow. Actually, maybe not. I'm kind of busy tomorrow. At some point this week, we will do DeSantis versus Biden, but today we were doing Trump versus Biden. This is what I believe is going to be the matchup in 2024. Donald Trump has already announced, and it's very likely Biden does run for re-election. At this point in time, unless something major happens, which very well could. He is old and a little bit senile, but that's okay. We love him anyway. So we're going to start by filling in the safe Republican states. These are the states that Donald Trump will win by more than 10 percentage points, really no matter what you do. They're pretty much the entire Great Plains region, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District. It's a very suburban district. Most of the Deep South, up through Appalachia, South Carolina. Maine's 2nd District is probably going to be over 10. Now we're going to fill in Joe Biden's safe states. They are the entire Pacific coast plus Hawaii, probably Colorado after 2022. Polis and the Senate race are both overwhelmingly for the Democrats. They won handily, and I think Biden probably wins it by more than 10. Same with New Mexico, although it could be under 10. Trump could do better with Hispanics, but after Mark Ryan-Chetty's very poor performance in the race he should have won, I think that state might be just a little bit out of reach. We're also going to give Biden the entire Eastern Shoreboard, as well as New York, Maine's 1st District, and the state of Illinois. So with that, these are the safe states. No matter what you do, they're going to vote for either candidate. That leaves Donald Trump with 123 electoral votes, Joe Biden with 196, with still 219 up in the air. Now we're going to fill in the likely states. These are the states that are going to be a little bit more competitive, but still should be pretty solid for each candidate. Donald Trump has 4 of these states, actually 5, excuse me. They are the states of Iowa, Ohio, Texas, Florida, and Alaska. The state of Alaska is slowly but surely trending towards the Democrats. I think Trump wins it relatively handily, but if Biden puts up a good fight and Mary Peltola, the Democrat who was just elected there to the U.S. House, if she does run a good campaign, does very well, then I could maybe see it being just under 10. States of Ohio and Iowa are probably going to shift about a point to the right each. I don't think Trump's going to win them by over 10, just because, Iowa possibly, Ohio, I'm not really sure about. Both these states are pretty solid for Trump, but I just don't think he's going to win them by 10. State of Texas, this is a state that Joe Biden is very unpopular in, and Greg Abbott did win by 11 points. Trump only won it by about 5 back in 2020, but we saw in 2022 a lot of the rural areas that we thought were maxed out continued to shift Republican. So there is clearly a little bit of Republican vote out there in rural Texas, and southern Texas and the Rio Grande Hispanics also kind of shifted to the right a little bit, and I do think Donald Trump would do a little bit better with them than Greg Abbott. So even if Trump does a little bit worse in the suburbs, which have been trending away from him, which even then I'm not sure that he will, because, like I said, Joe Biden is despised in Texas, as proven by many polls. I think that Trump probably is about a point better, winning it by about 6 to 7 points. Texas appears to be turning a corner. We will have to wait and see. Obviously, the Senate race could be a little bit interesting. Ted Cruz was in a very close race back in 2018. He's up for re-election in 2024. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I still think Trump probably wins by a likely margin. The state of Florida, Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio both absolutely crushed it. They won by like 19 points each. It was absolutely insane. And Florida, it confirms what we already kind of knew, and that is that Florida is basically a Republican state now. It's kind of the new Texas. And while I don't think Trump wins it by a safe margin, and I think it's a little closer than people expect, I've seen some people say Trump's going to win Florida by like 10, 11 points in 2024. I don't buy that. I think he's probably going to win by like 6 or so. But I do think at the end he does win Florida by a likely margin. We're now going to fill in the likely states for Joe Biden. They are Maine at large, Virginia, and Minnesota. Maine at large, it was likely in 2020. It was likely in 2016. Not a whole lot to say there. Virginia was a state that Biden won by a safe margin, but Youngkin has kind of built up a strong coalition. He has a very high approval rating, and while Trump is certainly not Youngkin, the fact that the Virginia Republican Party has seen a bit of a revival, and we likely will have a relatively competitive Senate race, whether the 2024 Virginia Senate race is between someone like Glenn Youngkin or Hung Cao, whoever it is, the Virginia GOP does have a solid bench, which means we will likely see a relatively competitive Senate race. And with the Virginia GOP as a whole kind of making a comeback in terms of how they campaign, how they message, I do think Trump probably gets the state under 10. Minnesota, kind of a similar thing. In 2020, the Twin Cities shifted heavily to the left. I think that was kind of a fluke. I think not that like there is the F word or anything. I just don't think it's going to continue in 2024. I mean, it could. I don't really see it though. So I think Trump does a little bit better with more with the blue collar types and in the rural areas who still vote Democrat, such as those in the Iron Range. But at the end of the day, I still think it's a little bit too far out of reach. I think it's likely for Biden, probably about 5 point win for him. This leaves us with all the following states, which I believe will be the most competitive. We're gonna start. Let's go east. Let's go west to east. We're gonna start in the great state of Nevada. I think Trump's gonna narrowly pull that off. We saw in 2022 was a pretty bad year for the GOP, to be quite frank. I mean, technically we did win in the generic ballot, which makes the technically a Republican wave year. But really, when you look at the results, most of that vote came from Florida, New York, and California because we had strong candidates there who ran off the margins in the more heavily populated states. In states like Nevada, however, we still managed to flip the governorship, and the Senate race was the closest race. I'm going to be honest, Adam Laxalt should have won that race. It's honestly kind of sad he didn't. I'm stunned he didn't, and saying this could age very poorly, but I do think at the end of the day, that because Nevada did flip, I mean, the governor race in Nevada flipped to the GOP when we couldn't flip states like Wisconsin, Arizona, stuff like that. So I do think that because, like I said, Nevada, 2022 was a pretty poor year for the GOP, but we still did very well in Nevada. We flipped the governorship. The Senate race was less than like a 10,000 vote difference. So I do think at the end of the day, Trump's going to very narrowly pull off a win in Nevada. Instead of Arizona, it's going to tilt to Joe Biden. I just don't see how Trump can win it. I mean, Lake was leading in every single poll. She had all the momentum, and she still lost. Now, we're not gonna talk about that. We're not gonna discuss Maricopa County. I like having a YouTube channel. So I think Joe Biden probably wins Arizona. It's clear that the McCain moderate Republicans do not like the Trump wing in the party. DeSantis probably wins Arizona. I don't think Trump does though. Going to go to Nebraska 2nd District. That's going to lean to Joe Biden. This is a very suburban district that used to be a Republican stronghold. However, it has gotten very competitive recently and has actually become more of a Democratic-leaning area. So I think Joe Biden probably does win there. Wisconsin, I think Trump narrowly pulls off a win there. I mean, we saw in 2022, Ron Johnson managed to hang on against Mandela Barnes. I thought Ron Johnson would win very handily. It is a little bit concerning that it was that close, but if you actually look at it, Republican turnout in Wisconsin just collapsed. So with Trump on the ballot and the Trump vote base really turning out, I do think Trump probably pulls off a very narrow win in Wisconsin. I mean, Ron Johnson has a lower approval rating than Trump does in the state, and he still won, and he still did decent in the WOW counties. Those are the suburbs around Milwaukee. So I do think that Ron Johnson probably wins relatively handily. Not Ron Johnson. Donald Trump probably wins Wisconsin by about half a point or so, maybe closer to 1. Because, like I said, Ron Johnson has a very low approval rating, all things considered, and he still managed to do very well in the WOW counties, the suburbs of Milwaukee. And Trump's going to get out that base in the rural areas. It did not turn out for Johnson and Michaels, and so because of that, I think Trump narrowly pulls off a win. Michigan, that's going to lean to Joe Biden. Whitmer won very handily. The Democratic Party now has a trifecta in Michigan. They control the governorship with Gretchen Whitmer, as well as the state Senate and the state House. So they're probably going to pass a bunch of bills with mail-in voting. Not that there's anything like inherently wrong with that. I'm not saying fraud at all. I am just saying that there's going to be very high turnout in the Detroit area. Trump and Tudor Dixon did very poorly in Michigan. This is a race that probably should have been pretty competitive and perhaps even won. I mean, Whitmer wasn't particularly well liked, but Tudor Dixon still got crushed by her. So while I think Trump does a lot better than Tudor Dixon, I think he does get that good turnout in Macomb County and the rural areas. I just think the suburban shifts we're seeing in places like Grand Rapids and even parts of like Detroit are just a little bit too much to overcome. Pennsylvania, this is a state that I've gone back and forth on. But at the end of the day, I do give Joe Biden a very narrow edge. I mean, Dr. Oz couldn't win there, and he was a perfect fit for the Philly suburbs. Mastriano got absolutely crushed. And so that kind of black pills me on Pennsylvania a little bit. I think that with Shapiro in charge and Fetterman as a senator, I don't see how Trump could win the state. I still don't think it's going to be close because if you look at the results, Oz and Mastriano did very poorly in the more working class, blue collar, western part of the state, which will turn out for Trump. But at the end of the day, the fact that those two candidates the fact that John Fetterman won in Pennsylvania really just blackpills me on the state. I don't see how Trump could win it. If the people there are dumb enough to elect John Fetterman, I don't see how Trump could beat Biden in the state. I do think it's going to be very competitive, though. I don't think it's completely off the board for Trump, but I do think that it's probably going to go to Biden. We're going to come down to the great state of North Carolina. That's going to lean to Donald Trump. The fact that they couldn't even Biden couldn't even flip it in 2020, and Ted Bunn won by about 4 points in 2022 in the Senate race. He probably should have won by a lot more, but still, when you compare that result to a lot of the other states that we thought how they were going to go, a 3 to 4 point win is actually kind of good. And Trump did win the state in 2020, despite literally everything being against him. And Joe Biden is not particularly well liked in the state. So I do think at the end of the day, Trump probably wins it by about 1.5 points, probably pretty very similar to his 2020 margin. Georgia, that's going to lean to Joe Biden, giving him the victory. The Atlanta suburbs are clearly too much to overcome. Herschel Walker lost by 3, and yeah, Brian Kemp did win by like 7 points, but still, Brian Kemp only won independents by like 1 point. He really only won because people just despise Stacey Abrams. If the Democrats put up anyone else besides Stacey Abrams, that race would have been a lot closer. And Kemp was kind of boosted by the fact that he had that moderate appeal because he did go against Trump, but not too much. So Kemp is just a unique candidate for Georgia. You put someone like Herschel Walker, who I think is a little bit more comparable to Donald Trump in terms of rhetoric, campaign style, and Herschel Walker lost. So at the end of the day, I think the Atlanta suburbs are just too much to overcome. And so I don't think Biden's going to win it in like a landslide, but I do think it's probably going to be a 2 to 3 point win for Biden. This brings us to New Hampshire, which I think is also going to lean to Joe Biden. Republican trends there are very poor when you look at them. We're not doing very well in that state at all. Chris Sununu, the incumbent governor who usually wins by huge margins, he's beloved there. He only won by like 13. And the Senate race was supposed to be neck and neck. Republicans lost by like 10. So yeah, New Hampshire is a very weird state politically. It's definitely trending to the left, though. I think if Trump really runs on an anti-war platform and an anti-opioid platform, like he kind of has hinted at he might, and I think if he really runs on that, he could make it competitive. But at the end of the day, I still think Biden probably wins there by about 3 to 4 points. So with that, this is the 2024 presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I do believe Joe Biden has the edge at this time. I just don't see how Trump, after the 2022 midterms, I just don't see how Trump could pull off a win. I do think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be an absolute landslide. I mean, if you look at 2020, it was decided by 30,000 votes across 3 states, and that was when the economy, we had COVID, everyone hated Trump. I mean, Trump had horrible messaging, the economy was bad, we had COVID across the country, and like I said, Trump only lost by 30,000 votes across 3 states. So I do think that with Biden as the incumbent, if Trump runs a decent campaign, I do think there's a shot for Trump to win, absolutely. But right now, I do think Biden has a very narrow edge if you look at the states that he has to win. We'll look at DeSantis' path to victory if he has one tomorrow, or maybe in a couple days, we'll see. But thank you for watching this video, I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe for more.